This is known as Good Shepherd Sunday. It's the fourth Sunday in Easter. So we always stop to look at all the metaphors and the well-known scriptures that talk about the Good Shepherd. And sheep and shepherd is a very common metaphor that Jesus uses, which, I mean, makes a lot of sense. Because when he was alive, of course, that was one of the main things that everybody would have seen on their hillside, going through town, just on the outskirts. It was a common thing. It's kind of like us using bikes and cars as a metaphor living here in the city. We see them everywhere. And this passage is something we see everywhere, especially the Psalms passage of 23rd. It's one of those few that anybody who's not associated with the church will recognize on sight, and it's usually associated with funerals for a lot of different reasons. Whether they are good or bad is totally of a personal point of view. But as with all scripture that we think we know or we're very familiar with, every time we read it, something new stands out. And that was my experience when I was reading this lesson from John today about the shepherd. That my sheep know my voice. Even those who are outside my flock recognize my voice. So there is one shepherd. It got me really thinking about the fact that we are living in a world that is trying desperately to pretend it's secular, whatever that actually means. I don't believe a secular existence actually exists, for want of a better phrase, because the whole nature of secular is that we create this empty space where there's nothing, and that's a vacuum. And anybody who knows anything about physics and science knows that nature abhors a vacuum. It always gets filled in. So what we have going on is a whole lot of made-up stuff and quasi-historic stuff and attempts to be authentic stuff, trying to fill in this hole where faith in our society needs to be. And faith is actually one of the primary building blocks, no matter how many people try to argue against it. One of the coolest discoveries, and I've mentioned it before, to happen in a very long time, is the discovery of what's going on in Turkey right now, and the anthropological theory that kind of turns everything on its edge that we first understood. For years, we thought that religion and faith came out of society. And now, with this discovery and the timing, where it is in history, of all of these mounds and these places of ritual gathering in Turkey, we're now realizing, or at least the theory is, none of this can be proven 100% because none of us were alive at the time. The theory is that it is out of this gathering in special spots to hold worship is how society developed. So when you really break it down, we as a species are a spiritual being. We can't help but be. And so we turn that knowledge to God. I mean, we have how many countless faith traditions in the world? None of us have the absolute 100% voice on anything. And most great thinkers in the world on the matters of faith and theology have agreed with this, that everything brings something to the table. Everybody has a different perspective and view. And here we see in the Gospel of John saying that even if they're not part of my flock, i.e., don't identify as Hebrew like Jesus did, they hear my voice. They understand. They're part of one big group. Understanding that everybody is interconnected, and the majesty and the power of that. So often these phrases, these scripture verses are interpreted as meaning followers of Christianity, the organized faith, the organized religion, rather than followers of Jesus' message. And that's just not the case. History shows us some of this. Christianity, as we even start to recognize it historically, is still at least 200, maybe 300 years after these passages were first written down. So the writer is not talking about the organized tradition that identifies as the Christ followers. The writer is talking about the teachings and what Jesus represented and what we were expected to learn from all of his teaching, all of his lessons, all of his censor, all of his frustration with his followers, all of the questions he asked the temple leadership, everything that Jesus brought to the table, everything we were asked to look at, every action we were asked to have, is all comes back to simply following Jesus, following the behavior, following the lived love, following the way Jesus was with other people. And the hard thing for past generations to get their head around, which I think, I'm hoping anyway, our generation has a better time at doing, is to see God in other traditions. And for other traditions, to see God in us. And believe me, there is a lot that identifies as Christian where you're not going to find God anywhere in it. And that is something that we have to, as followers, kind of show up to the light and bring that home for people, that we're aware that there's a whole lot of stuff out there misusing our name. If you look at all the world religions, past and present, there is a core there that talks about caring for others. Now, it's not always there in the way most of us have studied these religions. And in fact, you'd be hard pressed to find it in the Greek tradition of polytheism with Zeus and Hera and whatever else. But at the same time, we don't have a theology for that time period. We don't know what they actually believed about these gods. We just know the stories. The poem that was written, the theogony that was written about all of these. We don't have a real understanding of what they believed, how they lived out their faith in God. We do, however, have access to so many books and scrolls and tablets from our siblings around the world telling us their understanding of their relationship with God, which is essentially what the Bible is for us. It is helping us understand and walking the walk that our siblings before us, our Hebrew and early Christian siblings, walk to understand this relationship that we're in. And it is all about relationship. So getting back to the Good Shepherd and the metaphor of the Good Shepherd. I mean, you can see them standing on the hill with their crook in their hand, waiting to grab someone if necessary, to scare off the animals or the robbers if that's required. That is who the shepherd is. It's not even so much about the sheep. It is about how the shepherd takes care of us. But while the shepherd is watching, we have the freedom of movement around. And it's up to us to pay attention to where we're supposed to be. The shepherd might be there as a salvatory figure, but we have to appreciate our role in that too. There, as with all metaphors, you cannot take it too far, because as I've mentioned before, sheep, not the smartest creatures in the world, just well known 2,000 years ago. We don't want to be sheep. All due respect to that horrible children's song that talks about it. It's our responsibility to acknowledge the shepherd, the caretaker, the salvific figure who is wanting to make sure that we are all of us, safe, having what we need, having abundance for ourselves, not extremes, but having enough and then just a little bit more. If we look at the lessons of Jesus, if we look at the lessons of every major faith group and minor faith group in the world, a lot of it comes down to how we personally value ourselves, how we value our relationship to each other, and how we value our relationship with God, which sounds a whole lot like the greatest commandments that Jesus gives. It is our responsibility to be in that relationship openly, to understand our role as those who continue on now that resurrection has happened, to be the ones who bring the risen Christ, the understanding of that love and inclusion and that salvific history to the world around us. There are so many who do not understand who we really are and what we're about. That's partially our fault, partially not. But even when it's not our fault, it doesn't matter. We cannot sit and bemoan the attention that we don't get. All we can do is go out there and live the life that Jesus has asked us to live. I am the good shepherd, not the average shepherd, not the careless shepherd. And Jesus gives those examples as well. Not the one that's going to run away, not the one who is just hired to be here and will take off and the slightest bit of discomfort or if something better comes along, or in fear of something worse coming along. Jesus is the one who is resolute, standing with us as we work out what this world is that God has asked us to co-create. Jesus is the Good Shepherd. Jesus is the one who will care for us, who will protect us, who will be there for us. That kind of love is all we need to know about how Jesus wants us to be with each other. That love that says we take care of each other. So on this Good Shepherd Sunday, remember, it's not about the sheep. It's not about adherence. It's not about obedience. It's about love and care for those around us, whether they hear the message or not. That is immaterial as far as Jesus was concerned. We still proceed to keep all those folks, believer and not, other traditions or ours, under our watchful gaze. And the best we can do, the one thing we are called to do above all else, is view them in love, care for them in love, be the one who is also on guard for their well-being, their best interests, and their future care and success. Be the Good Shepherd.